Hello everyone, welcome back to another one of these little geography revision videos. We're going to have a quick look today at tropical rainforests, a bit of an overview of tropical rainforests, which will be one of your ecosystems that you need to know about in your living world topic. That's on paper 1. All you're going to need is half a sheet of A4 like I've folded here. Feel free to pause along as we go along. So, let's start with tropical rainforest. Most important bit we need to think about is their distribution. Where are they in the world? Okay, so where do we find tropical rainforests? First thing and most important thing is we find them along the equator. Okay, so we find them along that line that goes around the centre of the Earth. Okay, that line that splits the Earth in two. If you already know about the climate along the equator, you can always start to think about why they're found there, but we'll get onto that in a moment. If you think about some examples of some, well, you've got the Amazon, which is in South America. Okay, that's the largest rainforest in the world. You've also got the Congo rainforest, which is in Africa. And the case study that I've done with my students is we've looked at rainforests in Southeast Asia, in particular in Malaysia. So, in terms of distribution, the key bit you need to know is they're found along the equator. Alright? They will go no further really than the two tropics. They are mostly found along the equator. Okay? This then kind of gets on to a little bit about the climate, which we'll kind of get onto as to why then, or gives a bit more of a clue as to why we find rainforests in these areas. So let's think about the climate then. The climate here is going to be warm and wet. Okay, so it's lots and lots of sunshine, but also lots of water. Okay. Now, this is all well and good. If you ask to describe the climate, that would be absolutely fine, but sometimes you want to be a bit more precise. So you might maybe want to add that they've got, on average, around 28 degrees Celsius. So we're talking about temperatures, it's around 28 degrees. Okay, that's enough thermometer there. And in terms of amounts of rainfall they get, well, they get anywhere from upwards around 2,000 millimeters per year. Okay, so lots and lots of rain. Kind of makes sense, it is a rainforest. Now, we will come back to kind of what the impact of this has on rainforests, but it's because the fact they're found along the equator that makes them so warm, and it's because of them being on the equator that they get lots of these kind of wet currents that causes a lot of rain, lots of evaporation, leads to lots of rain, and a very wet environment. Okay, that's kind of it in terms of general distribution and climate. We then need to know kind of within the rainforest itself. So I'm actually going to go to the other corner and we're going to talk about structure. So this is the structure of a tropical rainforest. And the easiest way to do this is to kind of almost imagine this is going to be like my little meter stick. Really, you probably should be doing this with a ruler. Okay, but I haven't. Oh well. So, let's start along the forest floor. So this bit along here, alright, this is the forest floor. It's going to be lots of leaves, lots of soil, lots of dead leaves. Okay. Now this first layer we've got some small little bushes. We might have some very, very small little growth kind of plants. Okay, nothing too crazy down here. It goes up to about 10 meters, and this is what we'd call the shrub layer. So the shrub layer. This is where most of our small shrubs and our kind of young trees, our saplings are, because that's where they grow at the bottom. However, as we're going to find in a minute, they can't grow very tall. They don't get much sunlight here because there's already so much more the rainforest we're missing up here, and it blocks all this sunlight. So let's move to this next layer, about 20 meters now. Okay, we're going to now start getting some smaller trees, some very, very small trees, some trees that may be growing. Okay, the odd tree or two that's maybe just growing here. Okay, they're not very big, but they are getting taller. Now this is what we call, so I'll draw a little line here, this is then going to become our understory. or our under canopy. Okay, it goes up to about 20 meters tall. Again, these trees are really only growing up in areas with a little bit of sunlight. Essentially, there's a little bit of sunlight, they take advantage of it, they shoot up. These trees are going to be blocking the sunlight for other smaller plants below them. Now, these poor trees in the under canopy, they're not the big dogs here, I'm afraid, because we get to about 40 meters, and that's when we get to the canopy. So I'll write over here, this is going to be our canopy. This is where the majority of rainforest trees get to. So the majority of trees in a rainforest will grow up into the canopy. And if you notice, especially if you look how I'm drawing them, okay, like this, you'll notice this here, there's no way for sunlight to get down here between them, because their leaves block out any sunlight. So the canopy almost acts a bit like as a shield. It kind of creates a lot of shade beneath it, which is mainly because all these trees are just trying to get as much photosynthesis as they can. So they sort of block out as much. And here's a good little fact that I always like to add. 50% of wildlife in a rainforest lives up in the canopy. So things like monkeys and birds and insects and all sorts, they live up here in the canopy. Okay. Our last layer though, okay, and this goes up to around, it can go up to around sort of 50 meters, 60 meters, okay, but I'll put up here around 50 meters. We have got what we call our emergent layer. Now here is where we get the oldest and biggest trees. So this is our emergent layer. These here are the biggest trees. They grow super tall. They're probably very old, and these will almost got their own little ecosystems on their own. Animals live up here in the canopy. They'll live alongside on the bark of the tree. They'll even live inside of it. Okay, these are huge trees up in here in the emergent layer. Now, as we said, all of this blocks the sunlight. So as they get taller, we might even maybe write a little arrow here like this, and this is showing us what's happening to the amount of sunlight. So as you get lower down, you get less sunlight. That means that less of these plants down here are going to have a chance to grow, unless for whatever reason one of these trees was to fall over. Okay. Now let's start to expand this ecosystem a little bit. We're going to get a bit of an idea for it. Let's have a quick look at the nutrient cycle. So the nutrient cycle is just the means in which nutrients move around within an ecosystem. Now, in a tropical rainforest, this is going to be rapid. Nutrients very rarely stay in one place for very long. This is a very quickly moving ecosystem. And the reason why it is so rapid is because of these high temperatures. Okay, so these high temperatures, they lead to more decomposition. Decomposers work well in hot environments. It allows them to break down this dead organic matter. So leaves that drop from the tree fall onto the forest floor here, down here in the shrub layer, and are very quickly broken down by decomposers, and their nutrients are released back into the soil. However, because there are then so many plants here in this ecosystem, the nutrients very rarely stay in the soil for very long. And what ends up happening is most nutrients go into what's called the biomass. Now, if you can remember when we looked at the nutrient cycle, the biomass is just the living things in an ecosystem that absorb and take in those nutrients. And in a rainforest, most of the nutrients are going to be in the biomass. Alright, actually it's very key to remember that soils have few nutrients in a rainforest, which you'd almost assume wouldn't be the case because there's so many plants are here, but it actually ends up with so many plants being here, they absorb all the nutrients too quickly. Okay, so there's not much nutrients stored in the litter because it decomposes. There's not much nutrients in the soil because it's absorbed really quickly, and it all ends up in the biomass, in these plants and animals living in the rainforest. Okay, so if we were to kind of draw our little, very basic, I'm not even going to add in my labels, but if I was to draw my nutrient cycle, it would look like this. This is your litter, this is your soil, this is your biomass. Okay. Right. Last and final piece. okay, of our tropical rainforest overview. Now, of course, you'll need to know about animals and plants, but I'm going to do that in a separate video. You'll also need to have a case study for tropical rainforest focusing on deforestation and sustainable management. Again, I'm going to do that in a separate video. This is an overview of tropical rainforest biomes. I'm going to put up here in the top, we can talk about biodiversity. Now, my group, we had a really long talk about this issue, okay, because in their most recent mocks, biodiversity was identified, or their knowledge of biodiversity in the rainforest was quite low. It led to a question that wasn't worth very marks, but it would have been easy to grab a couple just extra little points and help yourselves along. So, what do we need to know about biodiversity in a rainforest? Okay, first you need to know that biodiversity, this is the number of different species. Okay, so if you've got high biodiversity, here's a little monkey, right, and here's a bird. Okay, I'll draw his little beak, his little tail. Okay, and I'll draw a snake or something. Okay. Biodiversity is just the amount of living things in an ecosystem. I probably should as well add on a little tree, because biodiversity includes plants, it's living things. A rainforest has got 50% of all species on this planet. So half of the species in the world across the entire planet live here in the rainforests, whether that be in the Amazon or in Asia or in Africa. Okay, they live here in the rainforest, 50% of them. Now, why are there so many species living here? Well, the high temperatures added with the high precipitation, so the rainfall, so really warm and wet conditions, well, this is going to be really, really good for plant growth. Okay? So these really high temperatures and this high precipitation, that's very, very good for plant growth. It means we have lots and lots of plants. Now, if you have lots of plants, well, these are going to be these are going to be our producers, aren't they? This creates or allows for more producers to exist within this ecosystem because they can photosynthesize. If we then have lots of producers, well, that means our ecosystem can then also support lots of consumers. Okay, lots of species, lots of animals. Okay, so this here is a very quick, it's a little bit longer than maybe I'd hoped to, but this is a very quick overview of tropical rainforests, going through the key bits of detail that you need to know in general about tropical rainforests. You will also then need to know about your animal and your plant adaptations, as well as a case study on deforestation and sustainable management. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.